Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Amanda Irvin. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Teaching and Learning, and I am delighted to welcome you all to the very first Provost's Conversation on Online Learning Talk of 2025. Round of applause. Over the years, we've had the privilege of hearing from leading experts from industry and academia about their vision for the future of education, online learning, and educational innovation. Today will be no different. There's a lot happening in the world of online education right now. Following the boom and during and after the pandemic, things seem to be cooling down a little bit. Many online program management, or OPM, firms operating in the market have downsized or exited the business altogether. It's becoming more crowded and more expensive to run and market online degree programs than ever before. Today, we are lucky to hear from peers at the University of Pennsylvania's School of Engineering who have been successful in running online engineering degree programs that balance rigor, reputation, and risk. Penn Engineering Online has grown from an initial concept in 2018 to its current state today, including 3 innovative online degree programs: Computer and Information Technology, Data Science, and AI, reaching over 3,000 students worldwide. To tell us about it, we have Senior Associate Dean and Professor Boon Thau Loo. Unfortunately, Becca Hayward is unable to join us today. Boon will be sharing some lessons learned, emerging opportunities, and future challenges for online education in engineering and beyond. We're so happy to have you here today. We're happy to have all of you here today. Thank you for Dean of Engineering, Shifu Chang, for hosting us. And please offer Boon a warm welcome as he enters the Columbia stage.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for inviting me here. I'm really excited. And I also, want to start off by acknowledging Rebecca Hayward, who's the Executive Director for initially Penn Engineering Online and now the Office of Academic Innovations. And a lot of this, she's really the driving force behind this. Really happy. Actually, both Becca and I had a ton of fun putting together this deck of slides. It's actually the first time in 6 years we are talking about Penn Engineering Online in public. So, and thank you for this opportunity. So when we started Penn Engineering Online, we wanted to define what our mission was at the time. And one of the key things is to broaden our impact. And we want to have an engineering education that was widely accessible, that's also affordable and flexible. And in the process, develop ourselves as a reputation for being a leader in education innovation. And I'll go through some details on how we achieved that over the past 2 years. I think it's just a time lag. All right. And so a bit of a background on the evolution of this set of degree programs that we have. In 2019, we launched MCIT, which is our flagship program. And if you look at the numbers on the right now the program has about 2,000 plus students. And 2023 was where we launched the second program, the MSE-DS, DS for Data Science. That has a smaller number of students, today about 329. And very recently, and actually just this January, we launched our third degree program on artificial intelligence, MSE-AI. And that's also off to a very good start with 79 students. And we also have what we call graduate certificates, which has 247 students. Now, our graduate certificates serve dual roles. It's actually both a funnel for students who start off with the graduate certificates, who then go into one of the degree programs. But it's also used in the opposite direction, where a student finish one of the master's degrees, and then they further specialize by taking additional classes as part of the graduate certificates. All right, so let me start off by kind of taking a bit of a memory lane through some of our humble beginnings on how MCIT online was first conceptualized and created. Now, so let's go back to 2015. And actually, this predates my time as the Associate Dean. So I became the Associate Dean in January 2018. But before that, Penn Engineering had dipped our toes into online education. We started with for example, the robotics MicroMasters, which our Dean, Vijay Kumar himself, was one of the instructors. We also have intro Python, Java programming classes, classes in algorithms. And at that time, we were concurrently testing out these on edX and also on Coursera. And I think some of the early results were a little bit mixed in the sense that we did get a large number of learners, but we also found that the completion rate wasn't as high in some of the offerings. But through that process, we learned a lot about how to teach in the online setting, and we were really eager to do more. So around late 2017, early 2018, we started thinking about, is there a degree program that we could launch online? And to give some context, around that time, we already have a sizable on-campus master's program. There were 15 different master's programs in the engineering school, and we had about 1,000 on-campus master students at the time. So out of the 15, we wanted to pick one to start launching it online. And we decided, after doing extensive market research and talking to other universities, to pick MCIT. Now, MCIT is a very unique program. It was actually started 2 decades ago in the engineering school, and it was a computer science master's degree designed for students without computer science background. And over 2 decades on campus, it has a very strong track record of taking in students who have, in some cases, zero computer science training, but after which they were able to get very good jobs at top tech companies after going through this intensive 2-year period of training. Now, a couple of things to note about MCIT was that it was at that time by design to be not a very big program. We were taking in maybe between 50, 60 students a year, which if you kind of put things in perspective, for a computer science program, that's not very big. And it was designed on purpose because these were students who didn't necessarily have computer science training. And the thinking was we needed a high touch kind of experience, high engagement to get them through the program. Now, consequently, we also realized that because of that, we were turning away a lot of very qualified students. And the acceptance rate I show here, less than 15%. This is actually a few years ago. Today, the acceptance rate is even lower for this. And actually, I did some interesting analysis as well, because first, of course, the applicants have to be qualified, but then we were also space constrained. And when we look at some of the most selective master's program at Penn Engineering, we could only accept a small percentage. Some programs are in the single digits. But if you look at the next group of students, they are in many cases equally qualified. I remember before I became Associate Dean, I was the computer science master's program director. And I remember making very difficult calls on borderline students on whether they should get in or not, because we were very space constrained. And I actually took a mental note to track some of the students that we were deemed kind of on the borderline. And many of them turned out to be just as good as the ones that we admitted earlier. So there was clearly a case where we were turning away exceptionally qualified students. But I think the other thing to note about the choice of MCIT was that at that time, it filled what we perceived to be a market need. There was the market need, was the need to reskill the workforce so that they could become increasingly able to work in a computational world. Now, some of them may decide to pivot their careers to become computer engineers, but we also found that there was people working in the industry, some of them even as VCs or in product management roles, where they really needed to learn how computers work under the hood. Now, the other reason for choosing MCIT was it had a nice set of classes which I consider to be sweet spot for launching at scale online. There were a couple of fundamental classes that all students have to take. So, which means if we develop the first few classes, we're going to have significant economics of scale. There were some other master's programs that we looked at where students would come in and they could have a choice between 30 different classes, and students would take, different set of classes, and those would be much harder, not impossible, but more costly and also harder to launch in the online setting. So for that reason, we started with MCIT. And when we started, we wanted to do something that was at scale, that was affordable. We priced it at that time at a third of the on-campus tuition. But we also wanted something that's rigorous and engaging. And at the end, the students should be able to graduate and get good jobs or fulfill whatever career objectives that they had. Now, with that, let's switch gears to talk about some of the steps that we went through to get to where we were. So in 2017, the couple of things that was really going for us. So first of all, Dean Vijay Kumar was very gung-ho about online learning. He himself taught a robotics class. I remember, actually, I just came back not too long from launching two startups, getting acquired. I came back to Penn, and I remember he came to my office December 2017, and he asked me to become his associate dean and to focusing on the master's programs at the time. And I remember I didn't apply for the job, and the first question he asked me was, Boon, do you believe in online education? So I remember that very clearly. So there was a lot of support from the dean, but I would say among the faculty and even among the school leadership, there were a lot of concerns, and I would get to some of the concerns in a bit. But the thing to focus on was you don't need everybody initially to be on board, right? Today, of course, there are many faculty involved, but at the beginning, we identified a few early adopters, faculty that were willing to come along with us to get this off the ground. Now, in terms of staffing, we had 2 staff members. Actually, one of them is Rebecca Hayward herself, who had some experience with MOOCs, right, through our experience with edX and Coursera, but not much more, right? We didn't even have a studio for recording, so very little know-how. But if you look back today, to actually launch an online program and to be successful, there's so many ingredients, components that need to go into the picture, right? So it's not only just developing the classes, which you clearly need with instructional design, but you also need to build a marketing machinery. You need to do recruitment and admissions, and consider more traditional on-campus programs. Penn, being Penn, and I'm sure it's the same for Columbia as well, the reputation of the school will allow you to attract a large number of students. But in the online setting, we have to work harder to get students to apply, right? So the need for marketing was something that was apparent to us. But also student affairs and community was something we had to develop in the following sense. Student affairs in a traditional on-campus setting, you'll be focusing a lot on, students coming in. I always joke that as an undergrad, you almost like going to the principal's office. But in the online setting, we're dealing with mid-career professionals. Some of them, they had kids, they have, they have things going on. But at the same time, you want to find the sweet spot between providing support, i.e. good customer service, but at the same time maintaining academic rigor, right? So it requires us also rethinking a lot on student affairs. Now, that was very challenging. So one of the decisions we made when we first launched MCIT Online was we did not want to do everything at once, right? If you try to do everything at once, it was really difficult. And keeping in mind, the whole concept was not proven. So it wasn't as though Dean Kumar, despite him being very enthusiastic, he didn't say, Boon and Becker, here's a blank check. Spend whatever you want, right? So we decided to go conservative. We partnered with Coursera in the first few years. And Coursera had a number of things that were very valuable to us. The first is the platform on which we already had experience launching MOOCs. So we knew that could be easily customized to support on-campus classes. The marketing piece was huge too, because they could, in a single click of an email campaign, reach large number of learners, but also learners that are well qualified in the sense that they are already interested in online education, right? So that was a big plus. So we saved a lot on the marketing. Plus, they also provided us some initial bootstrapping on student services and teaching and learning consulting. So that was really helpful. Now, on the course development side, we didn't really have much of an internal infrastructure. So at the beginning, in order to learn, we also engaged an external company called Extension Engine that provide us instructional designers to help us redesign our classes. I myself was one of the first few instructors, and I had the great honor of working with Extension Engine. And as somebody who has taught many times on campus, I thought I knew how to teach, but they actually helped me, redesign my class, break it down into small segments, taught me so many things that I never thought about. And by the way, when I launched my class online, my on-campus teaching evals went from 2.8 out of 4 to 3.6, right? So clearly these guys knew what they were doing. So the last thing was we couldn't hire a big team, and also there was a lot of uncertainty, right? We had some initial financial projections where even some in the school leadership felt like it was too rosy. We're not going to hit the numbers. So there wasn't an ability to hire a lot. So what we did was to float on temps, and then only when it was proven necessary, convert them to full-time positions. In fact, the last thing turned out to be something that we found very useful. Some of these temps are still with us today. They are now permanent staff. And the idea of hiring as temp, proving yourself before continuing on to a full-time position was something that worked well for us, and we occasionally do that today as well. So we had a very startup mentality at the beginning. To give you some idea, we didn't have a studio. So at that time, I had my associate dean office and I had my computer science office. So I told my staff, let's convert my computer science office into a recording studio. So we went on Amazon, we bought some cheap, low-cost sound absorber, and my office became the studio for a good 2 years until we built our own studio. We also were very agile and try to innovate on things that we didn't knew was going to work, but the online being a new space gave us a chance to experiment. For example, and let me just give you a few examples. I teach the large operating system, distributed system class on campus, and I have been using auto graders for a long time, but I always thought, okay, auto graders is a way for students to be lazy. They'll cut corners and just pass the test case and be done with it. So I would put, for example, time limits. You shall not support upload to the auto grader. You can only do it once every 6 hours or something like that. Now, in working with Extension Engine, developing my class, they say, why don't you try, not limiting the test cases or not giving any limits. I just try it out to see one semester how students learn and react to that. And the result was actually overwhelmingly positive. It reduced stress level, student learning outcomes were much better. And things like that, little things like that, we were able to experiment. That in a more traditional on-campus setting would have been much harder for us to do, given that we had taught in a certain way for a long time. The thing to note is we wanted to launch while maintaining quality. And at the beginning, you can imagine there was a lot of pressure, right? We announced the program while we were still developing classes. And as I told you, the first few foundation classes were ones that everybody had to take, right? So we were launching new classes while the first few classes were running. So the time pressure was also there. But one thing we did was to never compromise on the quality, right? So the instructors who worked with the instructional designers, they were given clear guidelines, and we would make sure we hold them to certain standards before the classes were actually released. Now, some of the tough questions we had at the beginning, and there were many, and this is just a few. I mentioned about the financial projections being too rosy. It turned out we outperformed any expectation that we had. The first cohort, we were expecting, we said maximum 100 students. But the number of applicants we received was so many that we had to take in 200 students, very, very qualified students, and to persuade half of them to start over the summer, right? So that was the kind of a thing that we didn't expect, but the quality of the students was very high. And as you can imagine, when we brought this to faculty, there were questions on wouldn't the student quality not be there? Would the classes not be as rigorous as the ones on campus? Would I, as the faculty, lose my job, right? Because now you have recordings, you don't need me anymore. And also, would the employers think this is a lesser degree? Because when we launched MCIT Online, we gave them the same identical degree that the students on campus would actually get as well. But what would employers think about it? And also concerns about prestige as well. Because Penn, being a brand name like Columbia, there was always the concern, like, okay, you know, our undergrad is very exclusive, very selective, but what if we let a lot of students into the program? Would that kind of make it less prestigious? Now, on hindsight, I think many of these have been proven to be unfounded kind of worries. For example, when we launched MCIT Online, the on-campus MCIT actually increased in the number of applications, not decreased, because they had the spillover effect of marketing. In some ways, COVID helped to legitimize online education. So this was pre-COVID. But when many universities had to pivot to online learning, then suddenly people found that you could actually deliver high quality education in the online setting as well. So many of these, I think, concerns, at that time, they were valid concerns, but I think we overcame them over time. All right, so how do we do that? I think a couple of things. Number one, the admission standards were set to be the same as on campus. Having the same standards doesn't mean accepting equal number of students, because as I told you early on, in the on-campus program, we had to make very tough calls because there were only a certain number of seats you can have in the auditorium, for undergrads, a certain number of dorm beds, right? So you have to make very tough decisions, even knowing that the next group and the next group, and maybe even the next group of students are just able to equally thrive at Penn Engineering. But in the online setting, we don't have to be space constrained anymore. We offer the exact identical classes and also taught by the same faculty. So one of the things we didn't cut corners on or was to try to say, okay, let's go out and hire many adjuncts or part-time lecturers, and they will have the Penn brand name, but these classes are not taught by the actual tenure track faculty. So we managed to recruit mostly our regular faculty who are research active to teach. I would say at the beginning, it was challenging. I had to go knock door to door, pull a lot of personal relationship to get people on board. But today, we have a large number of faculty teaching the online. And we wanted to make sure we deliver the same outcomes for success. And we measure outcomes by job outcomes and completion rates. So those are very important for us. And at graduation time, they attend the same commencement as on-campus student, and they also receive the same diploma. So that was some of the things we tried try to hold on to and not compromise on. All right, so when did we launch the program? So I remember I started January 2018 as associate dean. So this moved really quickly. By July 2018, we launched the program. And it was actually launched over a quiet time over the summer. It was like July, right? As you know, in July, August, most people in the US, go on vacation and so on. So we were a little bit, not sure about the timing. But I remember this really clearly. I came back to the office the following Monday, and at that time we were still using CollegeNet admission software, and the staff told me the mailbox was bursting. Phones could not stop ringing, and they said there were already a large number of applicants. There were applications created on CollegeNet, and I took a look, and they were from countries or from states in the US I've never seen Penn students from. So at that time, I knew like we were onto something really interesting. All right, so before I proceed, any questions? Yes.
You shared how you noticed that there's faculty and a lot of extra students. They couldn't admit that what is it not state.
Good.
Find the profile of it on at the aspect at the same.
Like.
Find out any other people that you already know both of it.
Okay, so I have more demographics data in a bit, but the short answer is completely different. There are students we would never reach, and they wouldn't never have the opportunity to study at Penn Engineering. Cool. And I'll have some data for you in a bit. So, all right. So this chart is actually really useful to look at. The light blue tells you the number of on-campus master student. And this one doesn't include our 4+1 undergrad accelerated master students, which by now there's like 300 plus. So just looking at external master students coming to Penn. And there's some trends worth noting. 2018, we have about 1,000 on-campus students. And as everybody knew in 2020, when COVID happened, we had international students couldn't come in. Some of them were learning remotely. So we had, and as in most universities, a slight drop. But actually, after that, the numbers picked up significantly. And today, including the undergrad accelerated master students, we have on the order of 2,000 on-campus master students who are learning across 15 different master's programs. Everything ranging from computer science all the way to material science, chemical, biomolecular engineering, and so on. Now, online launched in 2019, and the increase has been steady. And today, this number has gone past the number of students in the on-campus program. So, a small number of online programs outnumber all the on-campus programs created. But I think one important thing to note, and this was something we were really worried about at the beginning, was whether MCIT Online was going to take away students from MCIT on campus. And it turned out it did not, for two reasons. First of all, the group of students that would come to Penn to study on campus and online, they are very different, completely different. And I remember this very vividly because in 2018, I was in Beijing for the Penn Engineering Alumni event, and I told students there about MCIT Online. And it was clear to me most international students still prefer to come to the US by overwhelming majority, because for them it's also a chance to get an education, exposed to a different culture, and in some cases stay on to work in the United States. Whereas a online student profile is likely to be a mid-career professional who couldn't move, who living somewhere within the United States or around the world, that's coming back for reskilling. So two different groups of students. And the other thing to note is that there is spillover marketing effect, because Coursera was blasting out about MCIT Online. So now even more people know what MCIT is. So that actually caused the application numbers for MCIT on campus to increase, right? So it actually had the opposite effect. So I talked a bit about the beginnings, but I haven't really tell you much about the program itself. Now, there are 3 programs. So we started with MCIT Online. There are 10 classes, of which 6 are core computer science foundations classes and 4 electives. And from that, there are 3 different pathways. They could stay on for a dual degree with data science by taking 6 additional classes. They could do a dual degree with AI, 6 additional classes. And they could also, in some cases, decide they just want to stay on to take 2 additional classes, and they'll earn an AI or data science certificate. So we actually use the certificates in 2 ways. If we consider a student to be borderline, sometimes we admit them to a certificate program. They prove themselves, get a certain GPA and results, and then we continue them to the degree program. But we also use them in the opposite direction, where they finish and they further specialize in a certificate. So when we launched MSE-DS, the data science, it was also 10 classes. And we wanted to pick a second program that was adjacent to MCIT, purely because, first of all, they cannot be exactly the same, because if they are, they'll compete with each other. But they needed to have some overlap. So we could also benefit from economics of scale, right? Where some of the classes could be, who are maybe electives that are not as full in MCIT, could now be filled up with MSE-DS students. Very recently, we launched the AI program. And there's very clear boundaries between the 3. The MCIT, you don't need any computer science background. MSE-DS, you need the equivalent of a CS minor. Maybe you were electrical engineering trained, you have taken a couple of CS classes, then MSE-DS would be great. MSE-AI, on the other hand, is targeting learners who have a computer science undergrad degree. And the thinking is that somebody may have graduated with computer science training a while ago, but with all the innovations in AI, they want to learn about this field, right? So the AI I took as an undergrad at UC Berkeley is very different from the AI today, right? So I think even software engineers in the industry would like this opportunity to kind of learn and upgrade themselves. Another thing to note is all the classes are asynchronous. So we have a high quality studio. We get the faculty to record the entire class sequence. And then when it runs, the faculty will hold 1 to 2 hours of office hours and also meet the TAs on a regular basis. And on occasion, they will refresh and update the materials. All right, so let's look a bit at the demographics. So the program has 42% female. On average, the age is 31 years old. This is very different from on campus. On campus, our typical student would be somebody who just graduated from India, China, or one of the universities in the US, and they continue on straight to do a master's degree. Also, where they are from is really different. On the on-campus program, at the master's level, the majority are international students. But in the online case, 50% are US citizens for us. But if you look at people who are based in the United States, which means they could have H-1B, or some other visa status, but they're learning, then it's actually much higher than 50%. But regardless, it was clear that they were drawing from different demographics, and the average work experience was 5.5 years. Now, it didn't dawn upon me how impactful the program was until we had a chance to meet students. I remember vividly, pre-COVID, I was back in Singapore on a trip. I met a few Singaporean MCIT Online students. There were only 5 of them at that time. One of them was a lady, she was 8 months pregnant. She said, I would not have been able to do this program if not for MCIT. And of course, during COVID, I couldn't go back. 2 years later, I was back in Singapore. The first thing she did was to take out her phone to show me her baby. She's 2 years old now. And she's working at a tech firm in Singapore. So it was really heartwarming to hear stories like that. And then you come during commencement, you see some student, and then standing next to them is their spouse. And they say, oh, my wife or my husband has been studying weekends, nighttime. I even remember a student who was in college. Her mom was a student in my class. And I remember she brought the daughter to me, and I remember the daughter saying, my mom's working so hard, right? It really makes me want to work harder in school too. So stories like that, then you realize beyond the Zoom, there's a whole person and a whole family support system behind that that really help to support the students. So where do most of the students come from? This is a nice map, and we didn't put in every country. There's actually a long tail of countries where there's like one student, predominantly United States, spread out across the world. We do have some in India and China, but they are, compared to the on-campus population, they are much smaller in comparison. And we are very well represented in the United States across majority of the states. We have students from Kansas, Alabama, which we don't often see at Penn, right? At Penn, we tend to see more from California, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Texas, but it's very well represented across the US. And where do the students come from? If you look at the undergrad institutions, they come from many different universities. We even also have some Penn students themselves who graduated a few years ago, and they wanted to come back for retraining. And the employers are also very wide range. Interestingly, you can see there are some tech companies as well. So how did that happen? For a variety of reasons. On occasion, we meet a student who was self-taught, right? Maybe biology major, and did self-taught in coding, worked in the industry for a few years as a software engineer, but realized career is hitting a wall. They don't have actual training in algorithms or computer hardware software interface, and they really need to learn to get to the next stage of their career. We also have learners who maybe work in the HR or some department at Google, and they look across the room and they want to become an engineer like their colleague next door, right? So they also come back in the program. I also have met VCs, VC in UK, other countries, where they said, I need to make investment decision, but I don't know enough of the technology, and I really want to come to school, back to school to learn. So in the next few slides, I'm going to go through a couple of pillars of impact. But rather than focusing on the mechanics, I'll also tell you about some of the interesting things we discover along the way. I'll focusing on building the community, empowering student success, educational excellence, less on operational innovation. This is really things that Rebecca would have been able to tell you a lot of, but I'll focus on the first three for the rest of my talk. The first is building a thriving community. One of the things I did not fully appreciate was how much the online students felt a part of the Penn community, to the extent that they form virtual communities on Slack to communicate. They form student groups, but also if we have a meetup somewhere, they will come no matter how far. I remember I was in Amsterdam for a conference, and I took a chance to meet what I thought would be maybe a few students in the Netherlands area. And then I realized there were students driving 8 hours from Germany just to come to be with other students, right? So the yearning for the community was very, very strong. We actually make it a point when the student is first matriculated, we actually send them some Penn swag, Penn ID card, little things like that. They really feel they're part of the Penn community. And today, if Dean Kumar or myself go on any alumni events, there's actually quite a number of online students there as well. And by now, I think we have gone to many countries. We try to do it opportunistically when we travel. But every fall, in October, we also bring the students together, right? So they don't really have much of an on-campus learning experience. But once a year, we bring them on campus for a few days. They get to interact with faculty, and we hold a series of like in-person engaging events with them. So the second part is student success. Now, there is always this concern that in a large virtual environment, you will lose track of where your students are, right? So today, if I teach operating system to 200 students, I can see everybody in class. Although sometimes students don't realize, if somebody is like doing something else, it's very obvious to the instructor, right? Or the person in front is falling asleep, you can tell. But so there's always this worry that, in the online world, we won't be able to see the students. I think actually we found that there are many ways you could engage and figure out what the students are doing, right? How often they log in to watch the videos, different metrics that tells you about student progress. And what we found is also the need to rethink how we do advising, right? Through launching MCIT Online, we also developed our own using a CRM system, a student support system where we could track the student progress over time. And that has been tremendously helpful. So here are the list of some of the faculty that are involved in the program. We try to recruit as many of the research active faculty as we can. And here are the short list. And if you are in computer science or electrical engineering, you're going to recognize some of these names. So how do we make it possible? So many of these faculty are really busy. They have research. Some of them are department chair, or graduate group chair, or they are computer science faculty. You're already teaching big classes on campus, right? So how do we manage to recruit that many faculty? I think one of the things we did was to try to leverage economics of scale whenever possible. So if a professor is teaching the on-campus AI class, then they will also teach the same class online. And in the online setting, we try to relieve all the administrative burdens, right? We have staff hired as course managers. They will handle all the operational aspects of the class so the faculty can focus on being the subject matter expert. And reducing that load was a big part of getting faculty on board. And also regularly, we get the faculty together where they exchange stories on students and student success. And I think that over time really helped to build a community. So today, we have about 36 faculty. It ranges from computer science, electrical systems engineering. We have faculty from med school who's teaching bioinformatics. We now have a law school faculty teaching ethics. And there are about 22 tenure track. 9 are holding senior academic positions. And we have a small number of part-time industry experts that we try to minimize, but on some cases, for example, we launched a GPU for machine learning class. We really needed that industry perspective, and that's when we engage industry partners. At any time, 27 active classes running across 3 programs, 15:1 student TA ratio, and faculty spend roughly 1 to 2 hours to hold synchronous office hours every week. All right, so transforming lives. Now this program has really been transformational. I can give you so many examples, but let me give you 2 that the first is Anissa Ray. She was my TA I teach an intro computer systems class online. She used to work as an instructor teaching GMAT and GRE. And because of MCIT Online, she managed to get a job, I believe, at Palo Alto Networks, right? Cybersecurity company after she graduated. Melissa Amaya was a student who was, I believe, based out of Alabama. She posted this on LinkedIn, that she was a stay-home mom. She was also my TA, and I know on occasion, I see kids behind, on the Zoom. But it was only after she graduated and she posted this that I realized the kind of personal challenges that she had, but how, this program really transformed her life, right? So the amount she made, was really transformational for her family. It's not just her, but also for her family. So by now we have graduated 1,452 students. Here's a picture of them at commencement. And we started also tracking graduation outcomes. So many students are still in the program, so it's really hard to know kind of the end for them. But we started looking at 2019, 2020. Now there are students who race through the program, right? 10 classes, they take 3 every semester, slightly over a year, they're done. There are students who are working and they also have family, and they could take 1 class per semester and take 3 years to graduate. So today, out of the initial pioneer cohort, we have 70% who graduate on average 3 years. 20% has left the program, and 10% are still enrolled and taking classes. But in terms of career outcomes, 83% reported that they were in a new position, 19% remain in the same position, and the average salary of 135,000 is actually on par, similar to the MCIT on-campus program. All right, the journey ahead. So we recently launched the AI program. Hopefully, in a year's time, I'll have, we'll have more to say about it. But this is a program we're really excited about, and also this is the first time we are collaborating with the Penn Law School, launching classes on AI ethics, and we also created a new class on GPU for machine learning systems. One of the differentiation we have in both the DS and AI program is we wanted to train people who are able to build large-scale infrastructure as well, powering the machine learning AI systems in the cloud. So the last slide I have is where we are headed from now. So Penn Engineering Online started as a kind of like a startup, side-by-side Penn Engineering. We recently rebranded it as Office of Academic Innovation. In fact, we're in this process of integrating and bringing back a lot of the innovations to the on-campus teaching as well. And so we are embarking on this, innovation of on-campus classes. Many of the technologies that we use have already been adopted on campus, but we're looking to do even more. And while we just launched AI, I don't think this will be our last degree program. So maybe not right away, but in 1 or 2, perhaps longer time, we'll be thinking of additional programs. All right, so with that, thank you so much. It's my great pleasure. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you so much for sharing the journey of create. It's so interesting to hear how programs are created in online programs. And I, as someone who cares deeply about teaching and learning, like everyone in this room does, I'm just so delighted by the focus on, I think the phrase you used is the student beyond the Zoom room, right? That the students come to these meetups and that you see them with their children and they post on LinkedIn about how it's changed their lives. And I wonder, you talk about a lot of the goals or challenges that you had in mind as you were embarking on this journey so many years ago. Was that at the forefront of your mind? Like, how do we connect with the students? Or is that a wonderful unexpected payoff? I imagine there was some intentionality about that.
Okay, so first of all, I think when I first started, and I just speak from my own personal experience, when I first started, became associate dean. So Penn Engineering Online, the idea of taking a degree program online wasn't really my idea, right? It was, my dean had this great vision, and I happened really lucky to be in a position to work with Rebecca Hayward and so on to launch it. So for me, and personally at the beginning, I was approaching this like, okay, I'm the associate dean. My dean asked me to do it, so I got to do it. And at the same time, I thought, if I'm going to knock on my neighbor's door and ask, hey, Professor XYZ, you're going to teach, then I better, lead by example. So, I said, I'll develop an online class. I'll go through the same extension engine, everything that you go through. And by the way, today we have our own instructional design teams, but many thanks to Extension Engine for getting us off the ground. So then I started teaching, and I also think maybe some of my faculty, some of them have taught on MOOCs, so maybe they already knew what it was like, but for me it was brand new. But once I started, and I started to interact with the students, get to know them, get to meet them. And then I realized that developed a life of its own, right? And that's when I got really, really passionate. And I think in many ways, there was an unexpected benefit, something that I discovered later on that made me even more passionate. And also just as a slight personal note, coming from Singapore, I've been in the US since 1996, and one of my personal regrets is I never really got a chance to teach to people from Singapore or Malaysia, right, from the part of the world I grew up. Maybe once in a while, there'll be a student walking into the class and say, "Hey, professor, are you from Singapore or Malaysia? Your accent, And then, I meet like one. But through this program, I got to teach, like, as you saw on the chart, there are 50 just from Singapore, right? So for me, it's also like that ability to connect with people back in the place I grew up. I find that very meaningful.
Yeah. And now we will open it up to all of you.
Yeah, hi, that's better. Yeah, thank you. It was a very interesting talk. And I have a very procedural question for you. So as someone who's, taught online before, I know how time consuming it can be to prepare an online class when you are not used to it. And I'm just wondering how you manage to incentivize faculty to actually do that.
Okay, great. So that's a great question. So first of all, I would say pre-pandemic, my biggest, at the time, it was either the faculty was really excited out of the goodness of their heart, or maybe some of them, now I can't really read my faculty's mind, maybe do it for compensation. We do pay them to because as you mentioned, the initial lift was really high. But then later on, what happened is the cost is kind of amortized. I hate to use a computer science word for two reasons, right? First of all, many faculty who's put in the effort to do it online, they brought it on campus and it transformed their teaching. So for example, my operating system class on campus, I would put all my video recordings on Canvas. And now in class, I just use paper, pencil, solve problems, work on the code. So it changed the way I run the class. And I know many professors experience that. So you start off with a few early adopters, other people see the benefit. And I also think that in some ways, COVID helped because now, of course, COVID was a tragedy for many, but I think at the time, many faculty were required to teach online. Many of them improvised. But then, after that, I would go to them and say, hey, you put in all this effort, how about we now put in some additional work? You can turn this into even more beautiful class that you could teach online on campus. So I think in some ways that helped as well. But I agree, the initial cost is very high. But if you just do it for the online program and you leave it there, then the cost benefit is harder. But if you reuse it in other aspects, I think then it's you kind of get to achieve many objectives.
A quick follow-up. For being able to reuse it and redo it, is the instructional design team that you use, the company you use, was that very important in getting this off the ground?
Sure. So initially, when we first hired instructional designers, first of all, it was like best practices that we were told. But actually, I as a faculty, and I would say at the beginning, I wasn't sure about their role because I thought, hey, I've taught for, at the time, 14, 15 years. I have to go back and calculate. 13, 14 years at Penn at the time. I know how to teach. Like, why do I need you to tell me? Yes, you don't know anything about operating systems, so why are you telling me how to teach? But then I realized they were very helpful. They helped me. For example, I never knew that in an online setting, students' attention span would be short, right? But I kind of discovered this the hard way during COVID because I taught on Zoom for an hour and a half, and then I realized I finished my class, but there are still people on Zoom. They maybe went out, drink coffee, and just left Zoom on. Right? People have short attention span. So breaking it out into small segments, that was really helpful. Over time, we did build our own internal capabilities. And then we now have our own instructional design team within Penn.
I think the outcomes report, I've seen that before, and I think it's really excellent that you have it. How did you go about compiling all that data and making it available? Because I'm sure it's hard when it's probably self-reported, I'm assuming.
Sure. So actually, when I first became associate dean in 2018, we didn't have good data on career outcomes, even for on-campus. But I got this idea from the Penn MNT program because they have very high career completion. So I asked them, what did they do? So they would, if you complete the career form, you get something, like something you could wear on commencement. So I didn't want to do that something. So the initial one on campus, we gave Penn graduation marks. But later on, we found that if you run lucky draw to win airports, that's even better. Because I did a survey of students. I said, do you want a 100% chance of winning the Penn Engineering mark or 1% chance of getting the airport? Or that the second one turned out to be better. It tells you something about incentives. But anyway, we did that. The other thing I wanted to note is when we launched Penn Engineering Online, Central Career Services only supported on-campus students. So we had to build our own career services team within Penn Engineering. And that team today support online students. They also provide support for industry engagements on campus. And I think the team also deserves a lot of credit for collecting this data. It's not easy, even with incentives and so on to get students to complete the survey. And just as an aside, we, at least on campus, we partner very closely with Central Career Services because collecting that data is so important for so many reasons.
Professor Loo, thank you so much. This has been a true pleasure. It's a wonderful way to kick off the 2025 Provost Conversations on Online Learning. And please, thank you. Join me in thanking Professor Loo.
Thank you.